There's just 1 minute to showtime.
The engines are on.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
When they wrote up the systems and the rule set that we use, did working people get to write a line? What class of men on pen and paper jotted down their clues? With capital the heart of their design. When 90 million want a thing, but some shareholders say no, which class of people get to have their way? The people read the fine print, say that this thing has got to go, and we'll start writing a new contract here today. Don't you know that hundreds will work and one man keeps the money? They don't think they gotta tell us why. When they say the new social contract, all the bosses will be gobsmacked and everyone will want a sign. Oh, yeah, everyone will want a sign.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another exciting edition of Social Contract. I'm Nicolette, and I'm here with my illustrious world-traveling co-host, Mr. Our Mayor Jared. Hello.
What's
Mr.
going
Jared.
on? Good morning, Nicolette. Good morning, everyone online.
Yes. To the internet, hello. Good afternoon and good morning. We're on separate coasts, which is kind of cool, but also kind of weird at the same time. So, yeah, it's been a pretty big week in electoral politics for not being a big week in electoral politics. At this point, we were talking about this before the show, which is always funny. I love to say that because it's like, haha, we have a secret club and you don't get to hear about it until we say so. But we were talking about it before the show. And it seems like there's going to be kind of just this maybe flip-flopping back and forth. Oh, Trump's on top now, Harris is on top, and Trump's on top, Harris on top. So we don't really know at this point. Sometimes it's like real open and shut, and you're just like, yeah, this is clearly going in one direction. But right now they are after the DNC, the honeymoon phase is kind of ended here, and we're seeing some operative tactics going out that are kind of lashing out at other people like Jill Stein. And are not working as well as they hoped that they would.
Since there's so little substance, all we're left with is just the more and more pure form of just vibes-based politics. So it makes complete sense that the vibes are good some weeks, they're bad other weeks. Some external event could happen and it will be attributed positively, arbitrarily, I would add, to one side or the other, even though, we all are now aware that we basically haven't had a president for at least a year, if not a few years. We all pretty much know Trump is famous for having no substance of any kind. He just goes out there and riffs. So every other week it's like, oh, it really feels like Harris is going to win. Oh, it really feels like Harris is going to lose. And it's just like, which swing will we be on election day?
Yeah, and it's this volleying back and forth, which you always tend to see, but I think it's been a little more amped up because it's really just volley to volley to volley because there is no substance in either campaign, they're not putting forward any ideas, and then Trump will say something, and then everybody he says something too gets mad, and then he takes it back. So it's just a lot of back and forth that's going on, and we've mentioned this before. Obviously, Republicans are not making any attempt to try to woo the outsider voters like the leftists. They don't give a shit. But the Democrats, and you could tell this from the DNC, how even down to the way that they were, very kind of authoritatively dressed, and the fact that they were cutting, having cops speak and things like this. They are courting the never Trump Republican voters. They figured out way ahead of time that was going to be their swing vote. So they're going after them and completely ignoring anybody on the outside, which is I think, a mistake. I don't know that it's going to account for anything in the end necessarily, but it is a mistake to ignore the outside voters, because that block of people is growing. And when you look at the numbers between a lot of what Arab Americans are, where their mind is, they're really spearheading and joining in quite rapidly on the abandoned Harris campaign that they're running. And Green Party, I think, is getting more attention than they've really ever gotten in a serious way. They're always looked at as spoilers, in that kind of a way, but that's really not how it works. But they're always looked at as spoilers. But I think in the end, when you look at the numbers overall, like people that came up to this point in the other elections were like, I'm not voting for either one. I'm voting Green. They ended up chickening out and voting for Biden or something like that. That's happened quite a bit. So
Like
there ended up being like,
we don't have a Bernie area to, like, people aren't really taking the DSA isn't even saying to vote for Harris at this point. And
yeah.
I do firmly believe that the DSA and a lot of these organizations pretty much like Justice Democrats and all these like supposedly farther left organizations that consistently, CPU, Communist Party USA, that consistently when the elections actually come around just campaign very heavily for the Democrats. I think these all exist as kind of like funnels to get you just right back to vote for the way that you probably knew in the back of your head you were going to vote the whole time anyway, but you get to like pretend to be, I'm like radical. Whoa, I'm gonna talk about voting for the Greens. I'm just gonna vote for Harris. Like, I think that people are gonna do that, and that's why she's gonna win.
And then they want you to kind of, it's sort of like being like, what they do is whoever they're funded by, really, and whatever their motivation is, really, that despite what they say and do, I think it ultimately works out to be like, well, let's lead them out on a longer leash and be like, well, you tried, pat on the head, you did your best, but time to vote for Harris now and get serious, at the end when it gets really close and everybody kind of panics. And I think that's what happened. Like in 2020, I voted by I had to do write-in. Howie Hawkins was allowed to be voted for in Indiana, but I had to do it by write-in. Didn't give a shit about Howie Hawkins. I just wasn't going to vote for
Howie Hawkins, not a great candidate. Howie Hawkins.
Nope. Surprisingly not. Like I didn't give a shit, but I physically had to write it in. This year, Jill Stein is not on our ballot at all in any way, shape, or form, so I can't vote for her. I've looked at the ballot. The ballot is garbage. I'm not voting for anybody. Even my local elections are trash. So for me, my strategy is better off as a non-voter. But now, like I said a little earlier, the honeymoon period from the DNC has ended, and they're really going into propaganda mode hardcore. That's the Democrats, by the way. Not that they're not both doing it, but the Republicans really don't have to propagandize. They're straight there. Like, they're like, this is like literally what we want and like what we will do, and that is it. Democrats try to, put a, a pride sticker on everything or a BLM sticker and be like, same thing, but cute. So
the Republican messaging hasn't changed.
That's why you're seeing all these cutesy little photos of Kamala Harris with children wearing "I'm speaking" T-shirts, and God, go fuck yourself, like in the most like worst way. Because we also are now seeing, because they have decided they've got some time to work with it here, but they have decided they are going to discount any outside voting blocks or people threatening to do it, Greens, this and that, because they feel like it doesn't matter anyway, that they'll just ultimately come around to their side, or they just won't be counted and it doesn't matter. So what we saw over the weekend, or maybe it was a little before the weekend, I'm not sure exactly the date, but I know the whole internet saw the goddamn thing. So AOC in this really bizarre video where she's like filming one eye. I
think she does that commonly. I got the idea that like this is a thing she does. She just pulls up like Instagram Live or whatever and just like lays on her couch. I'm just like one of you. I'm a millennial laying at home.
Right? Yeah, I think that's got to do with it too. So she's sitting there with her camera like this, being like, Jill Stein is a scammer. And it's like,
it's one quarter of her face. It's really weird.
Right?
It's just like her right eye.
Yeah. Like, and she doesn't really have her facts straight about what's going on. And she's like, she comes out of the woodwork every whatsoever. And she's a spoiler and a scammer. And she's disingenuous. And it's like, okay, pot calling the kettle black.
She seemed not to know that Howie Hawkins ever ran. She thinks that it's just been Jill Stein the whole time.
Like, yeah, exactly. And so she has some of her facts unclear, and I think that the message came down like, you got to go on right now and say something against Jill Stein. You probably never even heard of Jill Stein before this moment.
Go
Like,
talk some Jill
and
Stein shit right
yeah,
now.
like, okay, and then that's just her falling into lockstep with, the Democratic establishment. And I think we're long past the argument about she was supposed to be a disruptor. She was supposed to be,
Bring the
the clear.
ruckus.
Yeah, bring the ruckus. Exactly. They've made documentaries about her and shit like this in the beginning, and it's like that was all horseshit propaganda on its own, because people tend not to realize. I think it's more commonly known now. Her early in her career in college time, she was a CIA spook. She has been a plant this entire time. It's just that wasn't, in that whole narrative about working at the bar. She co-owned that shit. So like this was not like this has all been a staged thing from the beginning, because everybody was like, what's happening, they're supposed to be doing things, when they just right away kind of fell into lockstep with the establishment and the whole mama bear nonsense and that.
If she had showed up, like, I don't even care where she worked or what her past was. If she got to Congress and did all the things she said she was going to do, I'd have a very different opinion of her.
Right.
She also would no longer be a congressperson, as we've seen by basically everybody else in that burning down the house Netflix freaking.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say propaganda, as in like a bonanza, right? But they're all gone. They're like mostly out. Cori Bush just lost her seat. Like freaking even Jamal Bowman is out of there. Fire alarm expert Jamal Bowman is out.
Yeah,
like, why? Because they didn't immediately support Israel. Like, Jamal Bowman and them, they aren't even saying, like, Israel cannot exist and we must have, like, one-state solution, blah, blah, blah. They're just like, hey, maybe we kind of stop sending as many. You're gone. We will spend more money than any House race ever to get you out of here. That was Cori Bush, right? Cori Bush was, like, the top dollar race of all of Congress's House of Representatives history, because they needed to get her out.
Well,
and she didn't even do anything. Like,
so, yeah,
it's not even like they were revolutionizing the system. They were just in there, like, complaining slightly, and that's all it took.
Yeah. And it was sort of mostly placeholding, and it was definitely coordinated. Coordinated by who? I don't really know exactly. I don't want to get into
state.
Yeah, well, when you just start saying deep state, you don't really know what exactly that means all the time. It's sort of a blanket term. So
I like the word permanent bureaucracy. The permanent bureaucracy, people who just seem to be there campaign after campaign, like the people who are, oh yes, they served in the Clinton administration and every other administration before that, like since they were 30. Like, oh wow, they served for George W. Bush and Trump and Herbert Walker and all these, like, the people who just are around. They get to jump in the lobby sometimes they're Secretary of State, like Anthony Blinken and them. And even them, I think those are like the head toadies who then go up and talk to the banks. But right. Sorry, continue. I'm getting off course.
That's essentially where we are with this at this stage of the political shit show. Is we have said before, we are not really for or against Jill Stein, like as a person. As a person, she's extremely competent.
She seems great as a person.
Seems great. Yeah, that's exactly it. And then if you put her against Howie Hawkins, she's obviously like, a super strong candidate, and but that's a pretty low bar. But
Howie Hawkins was like a pro-war green. It was very weird.
Very odd guy. Very strange. But it's just like, if at that time I definitely felt like I had no options, and I was still kind of on the fence about how things work, and felt like maybe my vote mattered, and it does not in this system. So and then also at that time there was a big push to get rid of the Electoral College. That never happened. So, and it's not going to, because that's the way the government decides who's going to run the government, and the people don't. They just pat you on the head, send you on your way. So that's where we are right now. That's kind of your update of what's going on. So it's like, this kind of stupid millennial try to talk to stupid millennial situation didn't really pan out. But I do think it did something really good, because I have sort of noticed that when Jill Stein is trending on Twitter, over time, I've noticed her numbers going up, the trending numbers going up. Now, great, I'm not going to sit there and pick through a bunch of liberals going, nah, spoiler, shut up. But the number going up is the number going up, whether they're for or against. And there has been a great big movement, like I said, among Arab Americans who are really not for either party, major party. So they're probably going to either sit this out or favor Greens. And it's not a bad thing, even if maybe Greens aren't like the most well-known and aren't maybe the most well-funded, or maybe even the most knowledgeable person in the room. it, moving towards that direction shows, that where people in their heads are at in this, and that they really are sick of the duopoly. We know that we're looking at two of the most incompetent candidates that I've ever faced off since last time. And except for, when you talk about incompetence, Biden's incompetence really comes more out of, physical decline and mental decline more so than ability, because he is one of the worst people who's ever existed in our government, period. He is an architect of some of the worst things that have ever happened in this country. He was not exactly politically incompetent, but these two definitely are two through and through Batman villains. And maybe Trump isn't so much of a Batman villain just because he's so dumb, but Harris definitely is who you would see in a Batman villain type of a thing, wearing this mask of I'm great, I'm adorable, but actually I'm the worst cop in the world, and I've done some horrible incarceration things, and I'm for all of the bad things. So that's basically just that's your headline for the day, because everybody's talking about it. That's kind of where it's at. But I think it went again. It did not do them the favor that they thought it was going to do, which seems to always be the case when they run a big gambit like this. It usually backfires, and I'm seeing that, people recognizing that more and more, especially younger generations who grew up on the internet, who know when they're being lied to, who know when bullshit is there, So that's kind of where we are right now. Like, people did not buy into it, but it also kind of got Jill Stein's name out there a little bit more, which I don't think they were intending. So we'll see if that actually amounts to something, because if there becomes a mounted, more cohesive movement behind her, like, I would definitely be like, you guys got to go out and vote for her if she's in your state, for sure.
If I believe,
just fuck it, like.
If I believed in the 4D chess of all of it, maybe the idea is that, all right, let's get Jill her media blitz now in September, so then by the time we get to late October and November, we are in the backlash area where it's all the stakes have been raised, and so they can, because they're trying to make her into the way that we perceive Ralph Nader, who, when you look at, I thought Ralph Nader was just the devil forever, because that I was kind of young when it was very, very popular to say, look, Ralph Nader is the reason that, was it Al Gore, that Gore lost this election, that the Democrats and the whole in the same way that right now older millennials will talk about, oh, but her emails, if only we would have elected Hillary Clinton, we would live in this magical utopia right now. Well, they tell themselves that every few years. The only reason that anything is bad is that one election we lost that one time. It's I didn't even think about it this way, but it's been brought up because the part of the Harris campaign is to talk about, it's 10 years ago things were so horrible, and it's 10 years ago was the Obama administration, and he had a full 2 terms. He had 8 years. It's most of the last 20 years has been Democrats. We've had a lot of Democrat time, and it becomes weirder and weirder to complain about the problems you are going to solve, especially when you are currently in office.
Right.
But again, people aren't voting based on logic. This is all vibes based. So the fact that you can come out and say that, and not everyone immediately doesn't go, wait a second, how are you complaining about how the car is being driven? You are in the driver's seat. You
Right.
can't complain about how, this different driver. You see memes that are if we don't stop Trump, this is what Gaza will look like. And it is a photograph of Gaza right now.
Right now.
Under the people who they're supposedly trying to defeat Trump to save.
Yeah, and I, the thing that drives me crazy is I don't argue with liberals, just like most folks won't argue with conservatives, because it's why the fuck bother?
I don't think these people are real. I think this is bots I'm seeing. I can't believe that real people are
But
saying...
what drives me nuts, the thing that almost pulls me into an argument, a needless, pointless argument, is this thing that I am seeing actual people, especially on Facebook, people I'm seeing people saying well, whatever's happening right now, if Trump gets in there, he's going to do it way worse. There's no worse genocide. There's genocide and genocide. There's no light genocide. There is no way worse. Maybe a little bit faster, but it's still going to be the same thing. Genocide is genocide, and I don't see how people can even dichotomize this into more than one type of a thing. It's the Trump derangement situation. And it is so infuriating to me that people could even come up with an idea that ludicrous and stupid. I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm just saying that, like, I have seen this commonly held belief that, like, well, Trump would genocide worse. Like, no, that's not a thing. That can't happen.
So let me
Genocide is
throw this.
genocide.
Let me throw this image up here just because, like, all right, I really hate trolley problem memes and the trolley problem style of thinking in general because oh, here, let me throw it up thing. Also, sorry for the really bad definition. I used all the pixels I could on this, but you get the idea. Blue, red, vote green. Like, this is the thing that the Stein campaign put out. And my favorite reaction to this were the ones who were like, where it's the dude who has the lever, he has a rocket launcher and just blows up the train, and it's like, that's closer to what actually should be happening. Is like, no, the train is the problem.
Right.
But what is it? Of course, people got people. I say people. I don't know if these are real people or not. Somebody online. This has been remixed and memed into where it's like they took the green stripe and like put it right back into the Republican one. And then someone's like, no, this is actually more accurate. And then they put over all the bodies like Palestine flag, Palestine flag. But then after the Republican one, they also put in the this caused a fight in the comments how the gay rainbow flag and the trans flag, and it's how they were like put separate. It's like, I'm not trying to say that trans people aren't part of LGBT, and that created a whole little mini fight, and that was hilarious. But and it's like, well, the more accurate one is if you scroll out from the right, all those exact same flags are on the Democrat stripe. Also, they just don't talk about. I hate this perception that the Dems are out there doing all these great things for minorities, or they will, they're just about to. They just need 9,000 more years of supermajorities, and they will consider nominally raising the minimum wage or something, maybe.
Yeah, but maybe or something. Yeah, actually, you've got a story about that coming up. Here, let me check into the chat real quick.
Yeah, I'm trying to segue. Hey, look at me.
Yeah, no, yeah, I wanted to hear more about that because it was a fresh story. Yeah. Hello to Are You Time Traveler 2. Thank you for watching. They also say that you've got to talk about 45, meaning Trump, saying schools are doing sex changes on your children. Yeah, I guess that's something he said. And that's
one of those
kind of
things.
goes along with what you're saying with the they'll do this and they'll do that. Yeah, he had some sort of ludicrous statement that he came out.
Well, it's one of those things where, like, you could even take that same kind of like line of thinking and actually talk about something that is real, which is like, why is the U.S. one of the only quote unquote Western countries, like all of Europe at this point, has banned sexual reassignment surgery for people under 18? And I'm not saying that there is never any weird edge case that you could find where, okay, maybe someone who is younger, this does actually make some kind of sense if you explain this super specific situation. But like, as a general rule, no, you shouldn't be getting elective surgeries when you're under 18. Like, you cannot use a tanning booth in most states if you are under the age of 18. So why should you be making? And instead, I see none of these bills are passing. These are like, in the same way that Trump throws out a ridiculous, they're going to cut your kid's dick off at school and not tell you about it. Obviously, that is not going to happen. In the other direction, you have like liberal people like signaling in the other direction where they're putting up these phony bills that actually that if these bills would pass, which they never will, are like, oh, you make it so, yeah, you could. Bills that encourage keeping information from people's parents. And the idea behind that is, well, what if you out this child and then their parents treat them very poorly? And it's like, I know what you're getting at, but the parents have to be allowed access to information of their own children. Right. Or how are parents going to hear that and receive that unless you are the most liberal-minded person in the entire world? You're going to hear, oh, they want to keep vital, relevant information about my child from me under the guise of, what if you're mean to your kid when they're gay? It's like, you have to be given the chance, at least, to react. You know what I'm saying?
No, in fairness, speaking from an educator point of view,
I was a public school teacher. It would drive me insane.
So he knows what he's talking about, and there is a line there because, obviously you can't put a child into a dangerous situation because they're expressing themselves in a way that the parents might not agree with. But at the same time, he's seen with his own eyeballs and experienced situations wherein, like, that you cannot put the school and the teachers and their peers that are responsible for keeping secrets from the parents, because effectively, even though students do have a Bill of Rights, which are never abided by, they do have them. But the idea is that, like a parent or guardian, the parent and the guardian, like, that's the idea. You are a guardian of anybody underneath, that is yours under the age of 18, and therefore you have to have a heavy hand in making decisions for them. So it's not about making up these nonsense bills or saying bullshit about getting sex changes at school or whatever the crap. It's about really changing the perception of like, okay, we need to have a bigger, more open point of view about kids wanting to express themselves and giving them more healthy ways to do that when they are underage. And conservatives are like, their heads blow off when you talk about stuff like that. Liberals are like, yeah, let's do it worse so that we won't do it at
Let's.
all. And that's where we go. But to back up a little bit here, because I diverged on our topic. But Jared has an interesting story that's just coming out of California.
In California, this is just to preface all of this. I view this as a getting the poor people to fight with each other thing, which is what usually is happening. That's the layer I try to look for on any of these very like controversial bills. Whenever suddenly a thing that is never really going to go anywhere starts getting attention. Like wasn't it just last week we were talking about the New York City movement or thing where if you are like very specific who filled out the paperwork and fit into very specific categories, recent immigrants to the U.S. are getting debit cards with like $1 a day on them. It's a very small amount of money, but the effect of that is it gets poor people who have lived there for a long time to start going, well, what the hell? Where is my $1 a day that I think some people are getting?
The week before. We talked about it recently with people thinking that they're getting all this free health care and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of food stamps and benefits and things, and it's not true. So,
it's really nobody's getting helped, but
No.
they like to. Part of the campaigning is they want it. It all kind of serves like multiple purposes. You get to go out there as a politician to like who is the Democrat base right now? Relatively wealthy, like liberals, it seems.
Yep.
Like the people who are the true blue hardcore. It's all people I know who have their financial future secured. They have at least semi-decent jobs.
Right.
It's like
primarily white people.
Middle class people who want to feel good. It's funny. The first person that popped into my mind as I was saying the sentence, I'm like, "Yep, it checks all things I said." And they are very much African American, but I feel that economics is more important than identity. Which, hey, look at this all fitting together into one story here. You get to go out on stage and be like, "We are doing everything for the immigrants," and then the poor people, like people who are struggling, go, "Wait, they're doing everything for the immigrants. Why aren't they doing anything for me?" Where secretly they're really not doing anything for anyone except campaigning, and they get it. That's the phrase "virtue signaling" applies here. I know it's used mostly by assholes, but it just keeps happening. The campaign continues to signal virtue. And we have this neat expression, continues to be accurate. So, hey, look at this attempt at virtue signaling that kind of backfired if you're actually paying attention. But nobody, I've heard nobody talk about this other than RBN and a couple other like alternative media people. I didn't see this on CNN. This is the Sacramento Observer, I think. SAC Observer. Hey, I'm a SAC Observer. If you okay,
it's so much cooler than just Sacramento Observer.
No, it's like don't say bisexual, say SAC Observer. Okay. So we have scores of advocates from across California protested at the state capitol Saturday after the legislature failed to bring two critical reparations bills to the floor for a full vote on August 31st, the final day of the legislative session. As you're probably aware of how our system works, they've been working at this for a while if we're getting up to the vote stage, and they probably were getting some progress along here before it was known that it was going to be Harris as the candidate, and then this becomes a far less convenient thing to be doing. So the protesters are chanting, "What do we want? Reparations. When do we want it? Now." The advocates expressed their outrage and disappointment that Senate Bill 1403 and SB 1331, both authored by Senator Stephen Bradford, Democrat from Inglewood, had stalled. So this is a bit of a long article. To get ahead of it a bit, it's not even that they put the bills up and they failed or were voted down, because remember, California has like an ultra majority of Democrat everything on every level of government, from governor all the way down to a heck of a lot of the mayors. So if this bill went up, it would either have to pass or a bunch of Democrats would have to vote down reparations. Man, that looks really good when you're running a Indian African American candidate. Despite advancing smoothly through much of the legislative process this year, the session concluded without a vote on both bills. They just didn't bring them up because they're like, we're not standing in front of these bullets. We're not taking that L for no reason. leaving the future of reparations in California hanging in the balance. This is becoming a political disaster. It's our own people holding this up, said Chris Lodgson, a reparations advocate from the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. A lot of acronyms in this story. Blaming the members of the California Legislative Black Caucus, so we have the CJEC and the CLBC at odds. Lodgson said the legislature's decision to pass another bill, Assembly Bill 1840, on August 28th, only heightened his frustration. That bill, authored by Assembly member Joaquin Arambula. I'm glad I figured out how to pronounce Joaquin, because I was saying like Jauquin for a real long time. But I moved to Arizona. Now I know several people named Joaquin. I like Joaquin Phoenix. I saw his name for the first time. Like, what? What? That's how you spell it? Anyway, that bill would allow eligible undocumented immigrants to purchase homes with state-backed financing, not free money, financing they'll give you a loan through the California Dream for All Shared Appropriation Loan, or CDASAL program. So many acronyms. So you see what I'm saying here? Getting the poor people to fight each other. You have poor black Californians who've probably lived there for several generations at this point, who are like, hey, can we get a little bit of help out here? We're struggling terribly, and I don't care if you call it reparations or what. I would prefer everybody who's broke just get the stuff they need. Like, I think everybody should get a payout if you are underwater and living on the dang corner. But if we were using reparations to get it through, whatever, great. Let's get something, anything done. But of course, it cannot get done.
Forward progress. And this is always the same political gridlock story, either if it's on this smaller scale, smaller relatively, because it's obviously California, which is huge, but not national. This is a state issue trying to work for its own state. But this is the same. It's always the same story. It's like, oh, well, we couldn't figure it out. Let's never talk about it again.
In this case, the figure it out was, hey, should we bring it to a vote? Shut up.
Yeah, no, don't. You're making us look stupid.
You're making us look bad. We can't do this right now. AB 1840 passed the Assembly on August 28th and is now moving. That's why I'm talking about this. It happened like this weekend. And is now moving to the governor for his consideration. So unless this gets vetoed, this is through, prompting some in the black community to feel overlooked. This tells me and black Californians, who are ancestors of slavery, who built this country, we are not as important, Lodgson said. We are not a priority or important as those other programs. That's what's most infuriating, and that's what black legislators are telling their people. That's not going to be accepted. Part of the reason I bring up this story, it is difficult as a pale person living in a world talking mostly to people who support a party where identity-based politics, like aesthetic-based politics, because when you look at somebody and see the color of their face, guess what? That's also vibes-based politics. You cannot look at a human being and know all of the content of their character by seeing like what kind of makeup they would have to buy to match their complexion. Like, that is not actually an indicator of your beliefs, values, work, anything. In fact, to claim so is what racism is. If you're saying I can look at someone and just know everything about them because how you look is the most important part. Like, obviously we can start talking about history, but like growing up in a certain neighborhood under certain material conditions also does not directly correlate to skin color. You continue to have, I hear this phrase often, black faces in high places. You have so many of these legislators, and when push came to shove, they did not even have the courage to bring this to a vote. If you believe in electoral politics, if you believe in identity-based politics, what do you explain here? Like, what is this? What am I bringing?
You hear about, again, this sort of isn't our area of expertise. We're acknowledging, but you hear a lot about black capitalists, quote unquote, not helping, black communities, and that's absolutely true. And
the only reason you would is either guilt or because you just happen to be very nice, and you can't just run a system on, I hope everybody's very nice.
That's it. And then, as you say, like lumping these people together, that is inherently racist, because you can't assume that every person, just because they are part of a group or part of a certain race, that they all withhold and uphold the same beliefs. It's not true. Someone who's well off, in doing a person like, a Kamala Harris status, she's probably not worried about the reparations check. Maybe she is. Probably there's a lot of greed there. I'm just making the point, right? Like, there's a lot of people who are like, well, it's not affecting me, so why do I care? So you can't assume that they hold the same values as somebody who is desperately in need of something like that.
It is a virtue signal for them as well. They want to be able to hold up that they're out there fighting for, quote, their community, and then people in that community will be like, you're not from here at all. Like, you grew up in a totally different neighborhood. You went to private schools. Like, looking at Cornell West. Cornell West undoubtedly has done quite a bit for the general civil rights movement of the United States, like, in through history. Look at what he's done for the last few years. He it suddenly showed that, wow, his interests more aligned with people, with his friends that went to Harvard, and I don't know if it was actually Harvard, but he went to an Ivy League school of some kind. He spent most of his life hanging out with, like, with academics, with people who went to very, very nice schools of various.
Lost you. Lost you a little bit. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Oh, more gizmo noises. Well, okay. Let's see here. See if we can freeze and unfreeze you real quick. For once, it's not me. Nope. Are we frozen? Okay. Well, I'll pick up where he gets his situation here sorted out. This is a big issue. This is a really big issue. This is not just a California issue. This is not just a poor person's issue. And being in a reparations can be a blanket term for anything that's there's any kind of entitlement that people deserve. When you say that people are paying into entitlement programs, it's because they're entitled to those programs, by way of being an American person who's paid your taxes and bills and had to put up with living in this horrible place forever. And there should be a lot more of them. So whether you want to call it reparations, specifically aimed at returning to people or giving them what they're due for what they've suffered under the rule of this country, or you want to call it UBI, effectively it's the same thing. That people who are affected the most, typically we know, are usually people of color because they're the most disadvantaged, whether we're talking about African Americans or we're talking about maybe Mexican Americans or Hispanic people who tend to get into marginalized farm work and things and are not as okay. Here, we back?
I should be back, assuming that things are working. I just had to reset all my stuff, of course.
Yeah, it happens. It happens to me all the time. This time it just wasn't me. So yeah, I vamped for a minute and I talked about, if you didn't hear me, I was talking about whether it be reparations or UBI, the people that need it tends to be people of color who are more disadvantaged in this country, and but all people who are disadvantaged should be able to be given a leg up by this country and be treated as though we are all people who are our value, and that poor people are not expendable, which is what things are at this time.
This feels like not feels like the way that I would analyze this, or the takeaway I have from this, is that once again, just like in New York with immigrant debit cards or whatever, now we have, well, it's not even free money. It's just loans. It said financing that's like backed by the state. So basically, this bill ends up being, in the long run, a giveaway to banks, because who backs all these who backs freaking mortgages? Who makes the most money off of mortgages? Is the banks. This is going to be cool. We got all these people who aren't even American citizens into debt slavery. Like, fantastic. You get to owe us for the rest of your life, and you're going to be working jobs that pay you some of the least in the entire country. So good luck. You're never paying off anything. And at the same time, we get to get two different groups, minority groups, to fight each other. Like, isn't that great? We get to take the reparations activists and the immigrants, and they can all be mad. And at no point does anyone look upward. Like, it distracts you from going, who is doing this to us? Like, why are things how they are? Are we fighting over? They throw out a breadcrumb, and then you watch the ducks fight over it and go, ha ha ha! Isn't that funny?
And it's the same ideology of getting 18-year-olds, 17, 18-year-olds into mountains of hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt before they've even necessarily figured out what they want to do with their lives, because it is let's do something for the banks, and let's use some of our most vulnerable people to do that. And so we're really talking about the same thing, is that the banks are allowed to take care of, or to essentially do what they want, but it's most especially they have figured out, and like I've said before, I don't like the late stage capitalism, but for the understanding of what I mean, it's the runaway capitalism that we're at, because things can get a lot worse. They have figured out that taking advantage of young people taking advantage of people of color, taking advantage of illegal immigrants who are, some of our most vulnerable among us, that they still can somehow benefit from these people that should be getting help and not be in guidance and not be being taken advantage of. But this country is beholden to money and to the banks, and
That's why you have to do these things based on economic realities and not based on like anything else. It can't be like, did you fill out the right paperwork? Was your dad the right blank? Because we've done the whole like blood quantum thing with, like, if you're a Native American person and you're trying to go to school, you can, in theory, depending on all of these very specific check boxes you have to check, and like certain IDs and birth certificates. Also, birth certificates amongst like traditionally tribal nations don't have they don't have birth certificates, like they don't have records of that. It's very convenient for the state how hard it is to prove, so you can get like your little scholarship, just so you can go to college for kind of free, because you don't get like your housing paid for, but your tuition, you might be able to get a scholarship. And at the same time, how many people have you heard in your life complain, these dang natives, they get all this free stuff from the government and weed? It's like, they really don't. Like, go and talk to anybody. Yes, a tiny, tiny little percentage of people might get a coupon. But like, in the grand scheme of things, since that is tied to blood quantums, you have to prove your like parental stuff, that by design is going to whittle down and down and down until eventually you have nothing. I've had Native American friends of mine describe these blood quantum tribal membership blah 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 things as a way to slow motion exterminate them, because eventually people intermingle, they tend to race mix, and then, sorry, your blood quantum's not good enough, you're only 1/16 now, so you get nothing. And then eventually it gets down to nobody. There's like one grandpa, and then he dies. And it's just, cool, we did it. The U.S. government finally exterminated that tribe through paperwork.
Absolutely, it's completely true. It's legalized eugenic process, and you're getting into the eugenics argument. It's just like such a big thing that we don't really have time to do that today. But
I only bring any of that up because if I read this paragraph, we have Tiffany, and I have no quarrel with Quarles over here. It might be Quarles. I'm not trying to say somebody's name wrong to be a jerk. But Tiffany Quarles, reparations activist and supporter of Bradford's builds, drove down from... But you go to the next paragraph, and what are they saying? I'm not disdained. I'm not discouraged. I came here to fight for black Americans whose families were enslaved in this country. My family was enslaved in this country, so I'm not giving up. They think this is over. They are wrong. We demand lineage-based reparations. And I'm like, wait, stop. You're about to blood quantum yourself. You're about to do the exact same. This has to be based on economic realities now, not necessarily whose dad was your dad, because they are going to paperwork you into oblivion. They're going to use that as an excuse to just not fucking do anything. You can't have it
process, and it's, they do that with people now who need Medicare or Medicaid. Like you should be guaranteed these things based on a certain income, but they will think of reasons to. I think everybody that's ever applied for Social Security benefits, like due to injury or illness or something like this,
try to get unemployment.
It is worked into the system that you will be turned down for X amount of time, but then you're going to get all that back pay. You're going to get a great big payment, no matter what you were owed while they fought you for as hard as they could to fight you, and they end up having to pay you anyways. So it's so stupid, because that's exactly what we're looking at here. It's stop block after stop block. These people in the government, they're experts at how to stop from helping anybody or serving the people that they are meant to serve. There is the government, and then there are the people. And that's why we're constantly on about unions. We got a story coming up about unions, but it's got to be unionizing. It's got to be organizing, because we do not have effective representation. What we have are ways to stop you from getting what you are due. And this is a prime example of that. I don't think any rational person would argue that people who are the lineage of slaves should in some way receive some sort of reparation for that, because whether it be, say that you are a lineage of slaves, say that you are exorbitantly wealthy and you don't need the money, then maybe you just get some smaller kind of acknowledgement or something comparable to your income, right? Some kind of income-based situation. Say that you are a destitute person who also has the exact same lineage. Those people obviously should be given a leg up, should be given opportunities to start businesses, should be given UBI treatment, healthcare, all of it, run the whole gamut, because that is the way that things should work. We should be working more in balance to get people into better economic states. But the government knows that, first of all, that they think poor people are expendable and don't matter, but that they can also use them to work endlessly and work to the point where they don't have good access to healthcare, they don't have good access to food, they don't, and they put them in situations where then they develop health problems, and that puts them into creating just getting pharmaceutical, enriching the pharmaceutical companies, and then ultimately enriching the funerary companies when they die, because it's a cycle of monetizing people. And that's where we have to cut the head off the snake. And that's what, unions are always attempting to do. And that's why there's so much resistance against it.
You ready for me to bring up my most favorite thing for China? So China had they had it had like a project for, I don't remember the exact name of it. It's all the names of their projects are hilariously literal. It's like the plan for the reduction of absolute poverty amongst the population of Chinese. It's always like a full explanatory sentence. But again, you can always say anything I say about China. Like, Pepper, you're just being fooled. You don't know what you're talking about. China's actually hell on earth, and you're just feeding into the propaganda. They set up a whole fake city, two fake cities for you, and actually it's terrible there. You just are such an idiot. But according to China, and according to like freaking poverty statistics from outside of China, like third-party sources as well, China has essentially eliminated absolute poverty. By absolute poverty, I mean people living on the street, people starving to death in their own homes, people not having access to like people dying for no reason just because they have no money. Well, the reason being of poverty. That has essentially been eliminated in China because they had like a 5-year. They do everything in 5-year plans because communism. But they sent out a bunch of party members like, we're sending somebody to every town and village, and you're just going to look for poor people. You're going to count them. You're going to figure out what the issue is. Like, do they not have electricity? We're going to give them electricity. Do they not have water? We're going to give them water. They need a doctor? Send in a doctor. Like, and as far as we can tell from all evidence available to us, it has happened. It has worked. And you can do some like, oh man, look at this poor Chinese guy. He lives in this tiny apartment. And it's like, yep. And he used to live in a ditch. No one in China anymore lives on the street. No one in China is sitting begging for money outside the doctor's office because they just can't. Like, the programs are available. And at no point did China go, well, are you of an appropriate group to receive this help? They just did it. They just did, oh, you're broke? Here you go. We're going to get you. We're going to elevate you instead of making a nickel a week to making a nickel a day. Hey, like, it's still, they're not living in luxury. But why have we not reduced our absolute poverty? And any effort we have to reduce things like that are always based on, well, who was your granddad? And did you fill out this paperwork? And did you do this? And it always has to have a whole load of nonsense because the goal is never to actually reduce poverty. It's to get the poor people to fight each other. Even if this reparations bill passed, great. Now you have different groups of African Americans mad at each other because, like, would Kamala get a reparations payment? She's the daughter of like a Jamaican guy and an Indian lady, and they both were very wealthy from the beginning, like elite university attendance, et cetera, et cetera. And great, there's a whole identity fight we can have about like who is really black, and it's like, who cares?
Yeah, right. And then you get the racist whites and the poor whites. You get them upset.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm sure various white people, they could trace their lineage from like, I was an indentured servant, blah blah blah. Or there are white people who heard through various circumstances. Well, I guess you would call them mixed race at this point, but like, you could be the descendant of a slave and look like me technically. Like, I'm sure you can find edge cases that'll make everybody really mad, and we can make sure nobody gets help because we're too busy fighting about nonsense.
We would exploit, not literally us, but because the government would exploit those cases and be like, okay, so the guy that looks like Jared should get the money that somebody who doesn't look like him should be getting. Like, that's okay, So no, like, these programs, these stories are propaganda at the highest level. Like, they know ahead of time it's not going to work. They've already had the secret meetings between each other, like the pizza meetings.
They're never passing reparations, like, Jesus.
Yeah, where they're like, we're not passing this, it's not going to happen, but we're going to put it out like it looks like we're working on something. Remember back, I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was this big thing where California was going to try to pass its own healthcare, own universal healthcare, which, being such a gigantic state, makes perfect sense, and it also would work like a domino effect to affect other states and essentially force them into doing the same. So, but then that was like, no, Newsom was like, nah. And it is not a coincidence that he in particular has taken on such an authoritarian role here lately, and that all of the Democrats have, because this has been a sort of lockstep idea, because like I said, they're trying to appeal to the never Trump Republicans and win them over. And because they all want the same things anyways, they just have the reputation of being more softer about it. But if they can get
An
away
entirely
with,
unearned reputation.
yeah, well, if they can get
It's
away
just based on
with,
vibes.
if they can get away with doing what, because there's, if you think about it in terms of economics, like there are all these industries, there are these lobbies, there are these businesses that are paying them to do these things, but there are only so many of them. So that means that they know that when we go Democrat, Republican, on all these races, that they are going to have to pay both people to get them to do their bidding. They can't be like, oh, well, there's a Democrat. They're not going to do what we want. They're going to overturn all the rules and make sure that we don't get to collect on poor people anymore. Yada, yada, yada. No, they are definitely, wooing both people, both sides. And these people don't get to where they are because they're not the worst among us and the most greedy people who are having, giant checks waved in their faces. So that's how we get to this point. So if you look at it from this is why.
Or blackmail. Money
Yeah,
or
that
blackmail.
happens a lot too. I don't know if it's necessarily like what the balance of that would be, but it's so much easier for any reason to just, if you've got shitloads of money and you want them to do what you're bidding, to give them shitloads of money, and that's really where we come down to on this, is that there is a and that's what we talk about when we're all about unions all the time. And I do have a union story which I'm going to quote from here, because anytime there's something good going on with union, because there's always like shitty leadership stories going on with unions.
UAW has gone like back and forth a bunch now. Like the Democrats don't like them, I don't think. Like wouldn't they like not let them speak at the convention or something?
I don't remember which union spoke, but some did, and they did the whole like Donald Trump is a scam. But it's like, come on, low hanging fruit here. But I personally come from the idea that there should not be a union leader single per se, but it should be by committee, and that there should be no political endorsements. That's just the way I feel about it. But something good that, I think maybe some more of these like more modern unions coming into vogue are kind of recognizing that a little bit more, that leadership needs to not have, and we've talked about that. I think that was one of our earliest stories about how people were, the falling, the rank and file who were just, and then some of them were like, we don't support Biden though. And then there were these big things, and they were being physically dragged out of out of the event.
It was quickly after the railroad thing, because Biden famously crushed a potential railroad workers strike.
The Democrats are not friends of the people or unions. They are getting paid by the same people who are paying Republicans, but the Republicans are just open about doing the dirty work. They don't care. They use it as their appeal. But the Democrats kind of like try to backdoor it a little bit and be like, we would never though, but we would never, but we would never. We definitely would never, so, but that's exactly what they're fucking doing. So, but, and that's why we're always like, you gotta have a union, and unions need to move past labor. And this is an example of that, which I'm super juiced about, because this is another group of really vulnerable people who are affected in the tenants, renters. Whether you rent a home or a condo, an apartment, whether you're in an old folks community, those kind of things. It doesn't just affect like, oh, well, I don't live in an apartment. What does it do for me? It's a good thing, because I'm sure someone who does. And this is something that where landlords in a great big way are taking major advantages of people, always have been. And what's happened is that there is a, let me call it correctly, what it's called. I have to look at my screen because my screen doesn't like to screen share, and I'll start stuttering and have to go on and off. So just to avoid that, I'm not going to do it. But these smaller tenant unions, because they exist sort of on a micro level of like this city or these groups, they are wanting to pool their power into a national organization that they are calling the Tenant Union Federation, which I think sounds excellent. Get some Star Wars action in there.
Well, I guess it'd be tough, which is fun.
and the idea being like to form a national, fully recognized, fully automated union for renters and for, and that kind of thing. Now, this is not a new concept. This started in, this particular concept really kind of took hold and begun in 1979 when economic conditions were very similar to what they are now. And runaway capitalism, inflation out of control, this fake shortages of things, to drive up prices, everything that we're doing now that was happening then too. But this is what this does is it's not just kind of going back to what I said before. It's not just about, oh, let's do rent control. Oh well, they're going to cap rent control. No, having a union. They're calling it themselves a union of unions, which is great. But what that means is that they are able to protect. Let me see, where's my paragraph that I wanted to refer to? Come on, let's move. Let's move. So, just to give you an idea, they in each state, how things are a little bit different in every state, different reasons, different laws, different things. They will protect against different things and fight against different bills being passed that are further enriching landlords. Because in 1979 and then further into the 80s, when they became these organizations and they tried to make a national movement, unsurprisingly, the lobby, the landlord lobby was kind of created around the same time and utterly crushed them with legislation and regulations on the local levels and the national level, and they were not able to form a national party at that point. And if they couldn't do that, those lobbies couldn't do those things if they didn't have government officials signing off on that stuff. So, going back to what Jared was talking about. But just, an example, in Louisville, the Louisville Tenant Union, and this is last year, passed what they're calling as a far-reaching restriction on public funding, contributing to gentrification of Louisville. So they put a stop to that. Kansas City tenants defeated a bill that was backed by billionaires in stadium tax, and so they were able to stop that from being built. Bozeman, meaning Bozeman, Montana, tenants were able to ban new short-term rentals, which is fantastic. They shouldn't exist in the first place. And they were able to elect one of their own members as the mayor of this. What is it? Elect one of their own as mayor in the Montana. It's just worded weird. As mayor of Bozeman. Okay, and then in Connecticut, the tenant union negotiated a collective bargaining agreement with one of the largest landlord holdings in Chicago. They were able to get a referendum on the ballot about an anti-displacement ordinance, and so on and so forth. So it's not just about like, okay, we control the rent, or we make sure that you have a place to live, or that these things stay open, or that it's that landlords can't do this, that, and the other. It's making sure that you have that they actually are forced to upkeep these buildings, that you don't have mold in your building, and you don't have water flooding in all the time, which we all know those stories of those slumlord apartment owners, which is generally frowned upon, but nobody does anything until it becomes a big deal, and the news usually has to get involved. So that's what these people are also, good for as well, and that's why you want them, and that's why you want this, even if it doesn't affect you, because we've been through this before. Like, we don't want to have to explain that you need to care about other people, but for some reason, people don't seem to understand that that's supposed to happen, because you might not directly benefit from it now. But if there was a national organization of protecting this very, very large group of people who are unable to own their own houses and are effectively paying more, which is not a coincidence, to rent because of, the nonsense of credit scores and what have you, then this can work as a way to build on that and say, like, oh, you own your home? Well, homeowners should have a union too, and then we just go and we go and we go. So this is a really excellent idea that they're doing, and then the uniting together, to try to force the issue is fantastic, because, like I said, this is a really major in number section of the population that are forced into having to rent. And, it's not just apartment owners. It's like I said, it's like you might rent a home, you might rent a condo, this kind of other thing. And in this, in a society that is trying to drive us into non-ownership, this helps people that are in that position, because, you probably talk to many of these people and say, like, oh yeah, I'd much rather own my apartment, or I'd much rather own a home, or oh no. It's probably going to come into the conversation a lot, but because this benefits landlords, and this benefits, the government to, symbiotically take and give and take and give with these lobbies, then it's only going to expand again as time goes by. So even though that past administration or Biden administration said they were going to put rent caps on stuff, they're not going to do shit. So because it's again we would never though, but we would never kind of a situation. So this is really good news, and it's happening concurrently. So there's no like, and then this is what happened. So I don't really have an ending to this story, just that it's really cool that this is going on because the renewed interest in unionizing in the first place. Plus, also there's several strikes going on right now as well that you can keep track of that are going on. So it's not. This is just one story in the formation of the really large, interesting union here lately. But
The ultimate goal is to get housing. Don't get freaked out by this, people. Is to get more and more of housing into the public domain, which doesn't necessarily mean like because the American perception of public housing is very, very poor, but our real estate bubble that continually inflates and deflates. We all joke about this all the time. How we've seen like housing prices go insane and collapse like multiple times just within our lifetimes, let alone throughout the history of the country. Like everyone, it's a perennial topic with people that you'll look at a very basic house and they'll be like, this house is supposedly worth $1 million, et cetera, because housing prices are extraordinarily inflated by the whole like bank scheme. Like that's our one of our favorite financial, like, where is most of the quote wealth in America made from? Because this isn't actually making wealth, which is the whole point of what I'm saying here. You get to buy a thing, a property, a house, built some kind of real estate, could just be a plot of land, and then doing nothing to it, magically the price just goes up. And then it just goes up and up and up, just like forever, not based on any value added to it. Like your landlord increases your rent not because they made your house like way nicer, but because it's all this like the bubble is inflating, asset price inflation.
which
Like
happens with owners as well. You'll notice like you might get a property tax bill and it's like, why did this go up? And it's like, oh, because we decided that the value of your neighborhood was more.
we
Nobody
evaluated
did
your
shit.
house.
There's no change. You didn't do anything. Your neighbors didn't do anything, but they just decided that the value was higher. So, and that's how this can benefit you down the road as an owner. If you're an owner, you're like, well, this doesn't help me, because then if you had if you formed or joined or created or were supported the formation of an owners union as well, you could get things done by like saying, oh, well, people who've owned their homes or own their home generationally, that they don't have to pay these gigantic ownership taxes when they change hands from generation to generation because somebody wanted to give their house to their kid, or that when they turn 60 years old, they stop having to pay property tax at all. These things are things that we should be entitled to as people, but by getting people into the renter scheme, it ultimately makes more money for these predatory people, and that's the main bad guy that these tenants unions are facing. That they have this lobby, this, and that's a real thing. It's a landlord lobby. I don't know the official name of it, but it's a real thing. And
It's called Citibank.
Yeah, right. Well, it's the
It's the
bank, right?
landlord's union.
They're in complete collusion with each other, but also because they decide the markets. It's like, oh, the market's on a bubble. Oh, it's too expensive to buy houses. They're deciding this. So, and then they pay whoever's in office or who's coming into office to do the bidding and hold these things up, like the reparations bill, to hold these things up and say, oh, yeah, go out there and act like you did something. They'll reelect you. We'll keep working together. You want to get reelected, right? Yeah, we want you reelected. We work together well. So it's a scheme. It's a perpetual scheme of like, keep people in office or whoever comes in next, keep them doing the same bidding. And we will, if you look at everything on the whole, go back to the Nixon years. Nixon was nothing but an incompetent Reagan. But so things started going really badly then. But it was Reagan who really made things piece and parcel to government off and allowed so much money to come back to them that they benefited from, that nobody's willing to give that up, so that they have gone on generation after generation after generation upholding these same values that enrich themselves, this top few people, and use other people and oppress people. There used to be this very robust middle class. It's gone. because they found out they could make more money off of keeping people poor and keeping people from being too disenfranchised and too tired and too hungry and too worried about their own problems, worried about losing their job to be able to fight back effectively. But when these unions are built and created and supported by the communities of the people who live in them, and then they grow and grow and grow, that is your advocate. That is your advocacy. That is who keeps things going, whether it's with your job or your industry or if you're renting something. We need these things to fight back, and that's why you're seeing the rise in this. And some unions are stronger than others. Some unions are less scrupulous than others. So it all needs work. But this is something we definitely want to see and definitely want to work towards. And you say, well, I don't want to be in a union because I don't want to pay dues. Well, nobody wants to pay stuff. But if you're going to have to pay a bill, this is the bill you want to pay, because this is something you get something back out of.
If we can grind, the more steps we can take to grind, essentially to grind profit out of of landlordism, I guess. It's even from yes, it's nice to, it's very easy to take this from a moral standpoint of obviously people being housed is better and is good and nice. But at the same time, right now, just a massive percentage of most Americans' incomes just goes directly to either paying the bank directly if you have a mortgage, or your rent is usually covering the interest of whoever owns that building's loan to whatever bank. So it all ends up just stacking on itself. And that means that is less and less money to go into the American economy. If you can't buy any stuff because you have no money left at the end of the day, and then you have a whole country of people who can't buy any stuff, that's how the Great Depression happened, as we all learned in elementary school. It's Ford is not a progressive figure by any means. He's a hilariously evil man, but his industrially progressive in that he paid his employees enough, famously, to buy his own cars, and suddenly everybody had a Ford, and we're driving around. Hey, you cannot have economic growth and success if you just grind all of your economic output into gotta pay that as interest to the bank, gotta pay that in rent, gotta pay that in fees, because that's not real money. Nothing, no value has been created when you take an apartment complex with 20 people in it and charge them more to be. No value has created, even though the GDP number will go up, because technically, hey, everybody spent more money, but it all just went directly to this bank,
yes.
Which used it to do what? Buy another apartment building next door.
or just hoard it. And it's interesting that you say that, because there was just a story that came out, and we've talked about the ills of the dollar store before. About that's another predatory practice that gets to just take complete advantage of people.
Not even a dollar store anymore.
But the dollar store, the dollar store industry, there's Tree and the all the different ones, but they came out publicly with a warning recently that said, hey, poor people are running out of money. They're not even shopping here anymore. They don't have any money. And that is basically the Waffle House index of the economy. They know, everyone knows that it's more expensive to be poor because you're paying a lot more in fees, things. If you don't have good credit, you're doing credit-based things, then you're paying higher interest rates.
Extra rent. Everything's rent.
Yeah, it could be rent. It could be on your fees on your car. It could be higher utility bills. If you are in somebody, maybe you've missed some utility bills or something, they might require you to pay more deposit money or higher amounts because they don't.
You're paying extra rent on your lights, extra rent on your water, extra rent on your
exactly.
Whatever your credit card is, just more rent.
Hit with a unexpected, something to fix in your house, a bill of that, or medical bills that you can't afford. Everyone knows this, that economically the most money is made off of the poorest people that there are, because the people at the top who could pay their bills, who could have the best insurance, who could do whatever they want, they're not really generating extra income. It's pretty much the same, but you can always find a new way to squeeze a poor person out of money. And if the dollar store industry is coming out and saying poor people are running out of money, that is a bad fucking sign. And it doesn't matter what the economists say, and it doesn't matter what, oh, it's going up, the economy's doing great, because it's not. Who the economy is doing great for is definitely not. And then driving more people into poverty to make more money off of them, which is obviously the design, the plan is where this comes into, and then we're saying like, okay, now this gigantic section of the population that we are predarizing, we predate, as the dollar stores. We're saying that they can't even afford us, and we give them the worst of the worst. So that should be on everybody's minds. That like
It's my
when you're
final
especially
China
when
mention. Final China
you're
mention of the show, which Chinese people on average pay less of a percentage of their income to the basics, to things like their rent, medical bills, food, etc., which means they have more money to spend back into their economy, which is partially to explain for why the Chinese economy keeps doing so well. China had a bit of a housing bubble going on. Well, you can argue that like you never know until it's like hindsight is 2020. You don't really know when these bubbles end until it's been a little while. But you'll hear people talking about like, oh, the Chinese real estate sector is collapsing. Because if you look at it from the perspective of buy a house, get its money to just go up for no reason, and that is GDP. Look, economy, production, where really nothing has been produced. You just took a thing and said, oh, it's worth more now. Why? Because I own things, and I've decided that it's worth more. China, either you can look from the perspective of its real estate sector had a bad time because its bubble did not keep going up and up like it does in America. Or you can look at it as China saw the real estate sector starting to do the same kind of stuff that was happening in the United States, and they spanked them. Like, no! Like, various restrictions came into place to kind of work towards preventing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I've heard about in the financial class in China, because they have finance people, they have a stock market, they got banker bros running around also, they just don't run the show. I've heard that they have, Xi Jinping has just proposed, and they do the stuff they say over there, a maximum wage for finance bros. It's $400,000 a year. Oh no. How will they ever possibly survive? But what would it be like if we were imagine that even being proposed here? It'd be insanity.
No, proposing earning caps would like. There's absolutely zero possibility that would ever happen here. It would be
Who is
considered a
serious about getting these incomes a little bit more equal? Like, what kind of moves would you make if you were actually trying to get that happening and not the opposite, grinding more people into dust, go live on the street corner?
Absolutely. And then it would also take away from the illusion where so many people believe that they could be a billionaire. They've got to trick people into believing that they could be billionaires here.
And you can in China, but not through finance. You got to go make something. You got to like start do a factory, like
Yeah.
do something that's
Provide a
productive.
service. And it should be like, and it's not like we do talk about China quite a bit as a model of like, living and socialism because this is a socialist show. That's not to say that China is like the best country in the world.
They're an example because they have far fewer advantages than the U.S. does, yet they seem to be beating us at a lot of stuff.
Yes. And that's why we're trying to pick a war with them, because we want to say you're doing too good and you're giving people ideas and we don't like that. And that was always what the whole myth of the domino effect was about. Like, you're giving people ideas that they can have things. We've got to stop you. Because they thought that, if communism was going to topple every government, because why do you think that people would go for that? Because they get shit for the work that they do. So yes, if given the option, take away the buzzword of communism or socialism or leftism or whatever the crap, and go to the most conservative person and say, do you want health care that you don't have to pay for but your government does? Hell yeah, I do. Do you want your wage to go up when the economy and inflation goes up? Hell yeah, I do. Do you want a good job that you're not going to lose and you have a guarantee that you get to keep it? Hell yeah, I do. You want a house that you can afford to fix up and you can own it and it's yours and you can pass it to your own children? Hell yeah, I do. Oh, welcome to socialism. Like that's like how you have just been socialism.
The point of the government.
And that's why we cite China so much, because in such a small amount of years, about 40 years, they took the advantages that we bestowed upon them, because we thought like, okay, we can really fuck the unions by going and paying other people to do it. Well, we
taught them how to make everything.
They did it and they made it work, and then they put their money back into their own infrastructure, and guess what? It fucking works. So now what are we doing again? We're trying to be like, don't you tell people socialism. You are bad. You are the enemy. And then so many people that are, what do we call it? Low information. The low information voters. And that's they're like, yeah, socialism bad, because they don't have any idea what it actually is.
The point of the government, both historically and I would argue just like logically, is to decrease the overall cost of doing business, both on the actual business, like literally business side, and just like walking around day to day human being. Because you have the side effect, the intended side effect of you now have more money to spend into the economy and keep the whole thing going. Every once in a while, you're going to have to write down some of these loans. Like banks in America are allowed to make insane loans that like look at them on paper. They're never going to be able to pay this back. Like those loans that they're going to be handing out in California to people who don't even have green cards. Yeah, you think they're going to be paying back $700,000 loans anytime soon to get a frickin' single wide in California somewhere? Like. That's not going to happen, and the onus should not be put on us in 2008 when Obama was bailing out banks. Why did those loans get to continue? Like they got paid out, and they got to foreclose on your house. How does that help the economy? Where are all these homeless people coming from? Are they coming from a different dimension, from Planet X? Like we screwed everybody out of their house.
The government looks stupid.
That could have been the point in 2008. That could have been the moment where they're like, you know what, banks, you've proven yourselves to be entirely untrustworthy. We're taking you over. The U.S. Treasury is now going to be the thing now, and not the frickin' Fed, which is a private bank. And we're gonna make loans that are designed to lower the overall cost of business, the overall cost of existing. We're going to invest in infrastructure, and we're going to bail out the American people. And Barack Hussein Obama said it's a bad idea. We got to bail out the banks and let them keep all of those mortgages in place. Like, at the very least, you bail out the banks and say, all right, but all those mortgages are gone. Those people just own their homes now. And imagine that would have been a party you've never before seen across the nation when Obama could have announced, everybody, we just took over Citibank. You guys all own your houses now. Here's your mortgages. You could take a big like phone book stack of mortgages, just like set them on fire, do a whole we dance around the fire. Like that would have been incredible. That could have been the beginning of American communism right there.
It really could have been. But no, because we can't have nice things. But it's, even if you are only at the point of like just being able to discuss these ideas or open your mind to these ideas, that we can have better. There's literally no reason. We change time twice a year. We can make the rules up. We can do whatever we want to do. There is no reason that we have to live like this anymore. But if you keep falling into the same trap or making fear-based decisions about voting and thinking really that it's going to have the impact that you're told that it's going to have, but it doesn't, or you just don't, open yourself up to the idea that we can have better things, even if you're living in a bad place and you can't see that how things would ever get better. They actually can. And there are people around the world that are proving it every day by the way that they conduct themselves and their governments. And the only way that we're going to go forward in this country is if we have these side organizations coming up, like unions, that are going to combat what the evils and the ills of the landlords and the banks and corrupt government doing their bidding. And that's the only way you can fight a machine that is as large as it is here. So we don't have to keep doing this. But what we do have to do is end this show. So Jared doesn't have a song for you today. He had a big party weekend, so he doesn't want to do a song today.
My voice sounds a little raspy today. That is why. I have an angry sinus that I'm trying to clear up before next Wednesday when I go on a trip. Oh yeah, not this week, not next week, but 2 weeks from now, I will not be here. There may or may not be a show at all. Yeah. Possibly small break incoming.
Yes, I was going to say that, but thank you for saying that because I had actually forgotten. We might be taking a break. We're going to figure that amongst ourselves, but we will keep you updated on our Twitter page. And so there's a lot going on, so sometimes we need a little bit of space from it, just like you, because we are also people. So,
next week, the 10th, though, we will be here. Maybe I'll talk all about what I'm going to do in Germany. That sounded threatening, what I'm going to do in Germany.
Yeah, well, you'll have your ear to the ground about stuff, right? They're going through a thing right now where their far-right party is getting a lot of traction in government. So since the first time in like 80 years, so it's happening again.
They're basically having their Trump moment where like all the poor people are like, man, everything sucks. Better go vote for something different. And then what's the something different? Oh, no.
Oh, no, exactly. Yeah, so cool. We'll be hearing about that. And then he can also, when we do come back around, you can give us your full report on that as well.
Me? So, oh, you know me. I won't be able to shut up. I'll be asking everybody. Hello, random German man. What do you think about this?
Tell me about the economics of Germany. Go.
How much
Start
is
from
your
the
rent?
beginning.
What are
No,
your
we
bills?
love that. If we've got somebody who's going to travel about the world and go on adventures, we need to hear about it too. So that totally works. So thank you all for being with us this week for our shenanigans and nonsense. Again, we will be back next week. Then we'll probably have a little bit of a break. We'll keep you updated on the Twitter page. Make sure to follow, subscribe, whatever. You can watch all of our past episodes on YouTube and Rumble. We have a new Twitch page that needs some followers on it. Go follow everywhere. And then, eventually, if we get enough people on our YouTube, we can maybe like monetize some shit or whatever. So, and that's cool, right? So, just because we're socialists doesn't mean we don't need some money too. So that's good too. So, we will see you next week. If you got questions, comments, our DMs on Twitter are open. You could always add us in that as well. So thank you for being with us. Be safe and enjoy your upcoming week till we see you again. So bye, everybody.
Bye.